The moonwalk, the glove, the sold-out stadiums, and the records that changed music forever. But behind the stage lights, behind the screaming crowds, and behind the music videos that made history, there was another Michael Jackson story that most people never fully understood. This story was not about dance. It was not about fame. It was not even only about money. It was about contracts. And these contracts were never simple, because Michael Jackson was not just an artist inside the music business. At certain points in his life, he became one of the most powerful owners inside the music business. He owned rights, he owned publishing, he owned pieces of songs that could generate money even while he slept. And that kind of ownership created a quiet war around him. To the public, Michael Jackson looked like a singer. To record companies, banks, lawyers, creditors, and estate managers, he was something much bigger. He was a moving empire of copyrights, master recordings, publishing interests, image rights, licensing power, and future income. That is why the legal battles around Michael Jackson's estate were never just about who got paid. They were about who had the power to decide what happened to his legacy. The first major secret is this: Michael Jackson did not simply buy songs. He bought leverage. Most people have heard the famous story that Michael Jackson bought the Beatles catalog, but that sentence is too simple, and it hides the real importance of what happened. Michael did not buy the Beatles' master recordings. He did not buy the original studio tapes of the Beatles performing their songs. What he bought was music publishing. That means he bought rights connected to the compositions themselves, the words, melodies, and underlying songs. This difference is extremely important. A master recording is the recorded performance. A publishing right is the song underneath the recording. When a song is played on radio, used in a movie, licensed for an advertisement, printed as sheet music, covered by another artist, or used in different commercial ways, publishing can create income. That is why publishing is one of the most powerful parts of the music business. The artist who performs the song can become famous, but the person or company that owns the publishing can quietly collect money for decades. Michael Jackson understood this at a time when many fans only understood album sales. The story goes back to the early 1980s. Michael had worked with Paul McCartney, and Paul reportedly showed him how valuable music publishing could be. Paul owned rights to songs by other artists, and he explained that catalogs could generate serious long-term income. Michael listened carefully. To some people, it may have sounded like casual business talk. To Michael, it became a blueprint. When ATV music became available, Michael did not treat it like a normal celebrity purchase. He treated it like a strategic acquisition. A TV controlled a huge catalog that included many Lennon-McCartney songs, but the Beatles material was only part of the larger package. Contemporary reporting described the deal as nearly 4,000 songs, and the final purchase price was reported at $47.5 million. Think about that for a second. In 1985, Michael Jackson was already one of the biggest stars on earth. Thriller had changed the music industry. He could have spent money only on luxury, image, or entertainment. Instead, he put a massive amount of money into intellectual property. That is not normal celebrity behavior. That is business chess. And the negotiations were not simple. They reportedly lasted around 10 months. There were lawyers, bids, counterbids, due diligence, contract drafts, financial reviews, and competing buyers. Michael's team had to study what was inside the catalog, what rights were included, and what future income the songs could produce. This was not just a handshake. It was a complex corporate transaction. The public later reduced it to one emotional headline. Michael bought the Beatles songs. But the real story was bigger. He bought a powerful income-producing asset that made him more than a performer. It made him a rights owner that changed the way companies looked at him. A singer can be replaced. A hitmaker can fade. But a catalog of famous songs is different. It can survive trends, scandals, fashion changes, and even death. Every new generation can rediscover old music. Every movie producer, advertiser, broadcaster, or streaming platform may need to license songs. That means a strong catalog can become a permanent financial engine. Michael understood that before many people in the public understood it, and that is why his contracts became complicated. Because once he owned valuable publishing, every deal around him had higher stakes. The second major secret is this: the catalog that gave Michael power also became the thing others could use to pressure him. This is where the story becomes darker and more complicated. Owning a valuable catalog sounds like complete control, but in business, ownership is not always absolute. If an owner borrows money and uses that asset as collateral, then the asset becomes connected to debt. If the owner enters a joint venture, then the asset becomes connected to another company's rights. If the operating agreement gives one side special options, then the future of the asset may already be written into contract language years before the public sees anything happen. That is what happened with Michael Jackson. In 1995, Michael's ATV catalog was combined with Sony's music publishing business to form Sony/ATV Music Publishing. This created a major joint venture between Michael and Sony. On the surface, this was a smart move. It placed Michael's catalog inside a bigger publishing machine and made Sony/ATV one of the most important music publishers in the world. But a joint venture is not the same thing as being alone in the driver's seat. It means shared control. It means operating agreements. It means rights, duties, restrictions, and exit clauses. It means the paperwork matters as much as the songs. This is one of the least understood parts of Michael Jackson's business story. Fans often talk about ownership like it is simple. Either Michael owned it or he did not. But in the real world, ownership can be split, pledged, optioned, financed, and controlled through layers of documents. By the 2000s, Michael's financial situation had become extremely strained. He had valuable assets, but he also had major debt. This is a situation many ordinary people misunderstand. Someone can own something worth hundreds of millions and still face a cash crisis if debt payments, interest, legal costs, and operating expenses become too heavy. Michael's publishing interest became collateral. That means lenders could look at his catalog stake as security behind loans. If payments were not made, the asset could be at risk. This turned the catalog from a symbol of independence into a pressure point. By 2006, reports said Michael entered a major refinancing agreement connected to hundreds of millions of dollars in debt. The deal involved his Sony/ATV stake and gave Sony a path to acquire part of his remaining interest in the future. That is the hidden power of contracts. Nothing has to be dramatic in public. A clause can quietly shape the future years before fans realize what happened. This is why Michael's contracts were never simple. The catalog was not sitting in a safe, untouched. It was connected to loans. It was connected to Sony. It was connected to refinancing. It was connected to future options. It was connected to pressure. And once an asset becomes collateral, control becomes complicated. Imagine owning a house. On paper, it is yours. But if the house has a mortgage, the bank has power. If the house is co-owned, your partner has power. If the contract gives someone a future purchase right, that person has power. If you need cash urgently, the person with cash has power. Now imagine that the house is not a house. Imagine it is one of the most famous music catalogs in modern history. That was the world around Michael Jackson's business life. He had a rare asset, but rare assets attract rare pressure. The third major secret is this. After Michael died, the contracts kept speaking louder than personal wishes. Michael Jackson died on June 25, 2009. After his death, many fans assumed the story would become simpler. His estate would collect money, support his children, protect his music, and preserve his legacy. But death did not end the contracts. In many ways, death made the contracts even more powerful. An estate is not run by emotion. It is run by legal documents, probate rules, tax disputes, court supervision, executors, trustees, business contracts, and fiduciary duties. That means the question was not simply, what do people believe Michael wanted? The legal question became, what does the written will allow? Michael's estate was placed under the control of executors, John Branca and John McClain. They became central figures in managing the business after his death. The estate had to deal with huge debts, creditor claims, tax problems, lawsuits, licensing opportunities, and major decisions about music assets. And this is where the power struggle became very clear. In 2016, Sony bought the estate's remaining 50% interest in Sony/ATV Music Publishing. The total payments were announced at $750 million, including a lump sum of approximately $733 million. Sony said the transaction came from a right that had existed since the Sony/ATV joint venture was formed in 1995. That detail is extremely important. This was not just a random sale. It was connected to the old operating agreement. That means the seeds of the 2016 sale were planted years earlier, inside contract language created while Michael was alive. This is why the title of this video matters. His contracts were never simple because they kept creating consequences long after the public stopped paying attention. But the 2016 sale did not mean Sony got everything. This is another point many people miss. The estate still kept important assets, including Michael's master recordings and MeJack Music. MyJack is the publishing company connected to songs written by Michael Jackson himself, along with other songs acquired during his life. So even after the Sony/ATV sale, the estate still controlled valuable parts of Michael's own music world. That separation matters. Sony/ATV was one bucket. MyJack was another bucket. Master recordings were another bucket. Image and likeness were another bucket. Estate trust interests were another bucket. Tax valuation was another bucket. Michael Jackson's business was not one treasure chest. It was a maze of different rights. This is why estate battles became so complex. One side might be arguing about music publishing. Another might be arguing about family support. Another might be arguing about taxes. Another might be arguing about attorney fees. Another might be arguing about whether executors should sell assets or hold them forever. And all of those arguments connect to power. One of the most important legal moments came in 2024. when a California appellate court addressed a dispute involving a major estate transaction. Katherine Jackson had objected, arguing that the transaction violated Michael's wishes and the terms of the will. But the court ruled that the will gave the executors broad powers to manage estate property while the estate remained in probate. This is a crucial teaching point. The court did not simply ask what family members believed Michael said during his lifetime. The court focused on the written instrument, the will. And the will gave the executors wide authority to sell, lease, mortgage, pledge, exchange, or otherwise dispose of estate property. That one legal detail changes the whole story. Many fans ask, why would anyone sell part of Michael's catalog if he wanted to keep it? But in court, spoken wishes are not always stronger than written authority. If the will gives executors broad powers, and if the court finds the sale is within those powers, then the executors may legally proceed. That does not mean every family member will agree. It does not mean every fan will agree. But it explains why the fight is not only emotional, it is structural. It is about who has legal authority. And this is the deeper reason the estate battles were not just about money. They were about decision-making power. Who decides if a catalog should be sold? Who decides if holding the asset is safer than taking cash? Who decides whether a deal protects the children better than keeping ownership? Who decides whether Michael's legacy is better served by corporate partnerships or family control? Who decides what his wishes mean when the written documents give power to executors? That is the real battle. Another little-known layer is the IRS fight. After Michael's death, the value of his estate became a major tax question. The IRS and the estate disagreed sharply over the value of several assets, including image and likeness rights, the Sony/ATV-related interest, and MyJack Music. This is not a small detail. Valuation is power. If the IRS says an asset is worth hundreds of millions more than the estate says it is worth, that can create huge tax consequences. A higher valuation can mean higher taxes and penalties. A lower valuation can mean the estate keeps more value for beneficiaries. In 2021, the tax court largely sided with the estate on some major valuation issues. The court valued Michael's image and likeness far below what the IRS had argued. It also treated the Sony/ATV-related interest as having no taxable value after debt. But the court gave MyJack Music a much higher value than the estate had claimed. This shows something most people never consider. Michael Jackson's name, music, and rights had different values depending on the legal question being asked. To fans, Michael Jackson's name is priceless. To a tax court, the question is not emotional value. The question is fair market value at the date of death, based on what was known or reasonably foreseeable at that time. That is a very different calculation. This is why the estate story feels confusing. In one headline, the catalog is worth hundreds of millions. In another legal context, an interest can be valued at zero because of debt. In another deal, a different rights package can be valued above $1 billion. None of this means the story is fake. It means different assets, different dates, different debts, and different legal purposes create different numbers. That is the hidden world behind celebrity wealth. The public sees one number and thinks it explains everything. But lawyers see rights, tax experts see valuation dates, creditors see collateral, companies see licensing potential, executors see fiduciary duties, beneficiaries see inheritance, and fans see legacy. Michael Jackson's contracts sit at the center of all those perspectives. There is also a more recent layer involving transparency and estate fees. Paris Jackson has raised questions about certain legal payments connected to estate work. In 2026, a Los Angeles judge reportedly ruled that $625,000 in bonus payments to outside law firms had to be returned to the estate. The estate's side has defended its broader management, pointing to the enormous turnaround from heavy debt to a highly valuable estate. But the dispute shows that the power struggle did not end with catalog sales. Even inside a successful estate, beneficiaries may still ask, who is watching the watchers? That is a powerful question for this story, because the executors may have helped rescue the estate financially, but beneficiaries can still demand accounting, documentation, and oversight. Both things can be true at the same time. The estate can be financially successful and still face disputes over process, fees, transparency, and control. That is what makes Michael Jackson's business legacy so unusual. It is not a simple hero and villain story. It is a story about a brilliant artist who became an owner whose assets became collateral, and an estate whose contracts continued to shape power long after his death. And when you step back, the three secrets become clear. Secret number 1, Michael Jackson understood publishing as power. He did not just want hit records. He wanted ownership of songs that could earn money for generations. Secret number 2, that ownership became tied to debt and corporate agreements. The same catalog that made him powerful also created pressure when loans, refinancing, and Sony's contractual rights entered the picture. Secret number 3, after his death, the legal documents became more powerful than personal memories. The estate battles were not only about cash, They were about who had authority to interpret, protect, sell, and reshape Michael Jackson's legacy. And maybe that is the biggest lesson. Michael Jackson's music made him famous, but his contracts made him powerful. And once contracts create power, they do not disappear when the music stops. They survive in courtrooms, boardrooms, tax filings, trust documents, licensing agreements, and estate petitions. That is why Michael Jackson's contracts were never simple. Because his music was never just music. It was a catalog. It was collateral. It was a company. It was a tax asset. It was family inheritance. It was corporate strategy. It was legal authority. It was control. And in the end, the fight around Michael Jackson was not only about who loved him most or who remembered his wishes most clearly, it was about who held the documents. Because in the business of music, the most powerful voice is not always the loudest voice on stage. Sometimes it is the quiet language written inside the contract.